You ever stop and think about how weird the English language is? I mean, why do we say I went, but never I goed? It's one of those little puzzles we all just accept. But today, we're going to crack the code on this whole irregular verb mystery. Right? This is the classic example. Or how about I saw instead of I seed? It's a question pretty much every single person learning English asks. And honestly, most native speakers don't really have a good answer. We just say, well, that's just how it is. But is it? At first glance, it feels like this chaotic pile of exceptions you just have to memorize. But they are not random at all. Turns out, they're actually clues, little linguistic fossils that tell a secret story about how our language was born and, believe it or not, how it's still changing right now.
Okay, so first, let's just all get on the same page and admit why this is such an annoying puzzle to begin with.
Look, if you've ever made one of these mistakes, you are in very, very good company. It happens all the time. You forget a verb is irregular and say something like, I bite it instead of I bought it. Or you mix up verbs that sound kind of similar, like fall and feel, so you get fell and felt all tangled up. And don't even get me started on read, which is spelled the same but sounds different in the past tense. It's a total minefield.
So, just to be super clear, here's the deal. A regular verb is easy. It follows that simple, predictable pattern of adding ed to make it past tense. Walk becomes walked. An irregular verb is basically any verb that decides to break that rule and do its own thing.
And that brings us right to the heart of it. Is this all just chaos? Are these verbs nothing more than ancient mistakes that people just kept repeating for so long that they eventually became official? Well, the answer, it turns out, is a big, fascinating no. Believe it or not, there's actually a method to this madness. Let's take a look at the very first clue that suggests these verbs are way more organized than they look. Okay, check this out. What's so cool is how many of these verbs actually fall into groups with similar vowel changes. Take a look at that I-A-U pattern. You've got sing, sang, sung. Then begin, began, begun. Drink, drank, drunk. See that? It's a consistent pattern. Same thing for the one below it. Bleed, bled, bled. Keep, kept, kept. Once you start seeing these groups, they stop looking like random exceptions and start looking like, well, a different kind of system.
So, if these are patterns, where in the world did they come from? The best way to think about them is as fossils. They are the perfectly preserved remains of a much, much older way of speaking.
To really get what's going on with our verbs today, we have to jump in a time machine. We're going back over 1,000 years, to the age of Old English, the language of epic poems like Beowulf. See, way back then, English had two main ways of making a verb past tense. You had weak verbs, which added an ending to the word, kind of like our modern ed rule. But then you had the strong verbs, and they didn't add an ending. They changed their inside vowel. Sound familiar? It should. Today's so-called irregular verbs are the direct descendants of these once powerful strong verbs. And this picture just illustrates the point perfectly. What we call irregular today wasn't irregular at all in Old English. They were part of a complex but totally consistent set of rules. They weren't the exceptions. They were a whole other system of grammar running in parallel.
Let's watch this happen with a real example. Take the verb help. In Old English, it was a strong verb. The past tense was help. But over hundreds of years, as you can see here, it slowly started to change. Until today, it's just plain old helped. The simple ed rule began taking over in a process linguists call regularization.
And that, right there, leads us to the absolute core of the mystery. Why did some of these old strong verbs, like help, give in to the ed rule, while others, like sing, manage to fight it off and stay weird and irregular to this day? What's the secret that determines which verbs survive? The answer, it turns out, has less to do with grammar rules and more to do with math. It all comes down to a principle we can call survival of the busiest. And this is where modern science finally cracked the case. First, here's a pretty surprising fact for you. Today, fewer than 3% of all verbs in the English language are irregular. That's it. The ed rule has almost completely won the war. Almost. But get this. Even though they're so rare overall, the 10 most frequently used verbs in the entire language, we're talking be, have, do, go, say, every single one of them is irregular. Now that is a massive clue. It's like their popularity is giving them some kind of superpower.
And in 2007, researchers finally put a number on it. In a huge study, they actually discovered a mathematical law that governs how verbs evolve. Now, that quote sounds really complicated, but the idea behind it is incredibly simple. The more often a verb gets used, the longer it takes for it to become regular.
So here's what that looks like in the real world. Think about it. Super common verbs like be and go are used so constantly that we learn their strange forms by heart from the time we're toddlers. They're basically immune to changing. But what about rare verbs like slink or strive? We just don't hear them enough, so our brains are tempted to default to the easy rule and just stick an edit on the end. It's literally a use it or lose it system. How often we say a word is the key to its survival. So now that we've unlocked this principle, we can do something really amazing. We can actually watch language evolve in real time. And we can even make some pretty solid predictions about where it's headed next. Yeah, this isn't all just ancient history. The battle between the old strong verbs and that new dominant ed rule is still raging on, right under our noses. Just look at the difference between American and British English. Verbs like learn and burn are becoming regular really fast over in the US. People pretty much always say learned and burned. But in the UK, you'll still hear the old irregular forms, learned and burnt, all the time. We are literally watching the language change in two different directions at the same time.
And using this frequency rule, scientists can even predict which domino is going to fall next. The verb wed, for instance, is not used very often, which makes it a perfect candidate to be regularized. And sure enough, wedded is already becoming way more common than wed. So this might be your last chance to see someone who has been newlywed. So what seems like just another annoying grammar rule is actually a window into 1,000 years of history and evolution. It's a powerful reminder that language isn't some set of rules carved in stone. It's a living, breathing system that's constantly adapting. And what you or I might think of as a mistake today, well, it might just be a preview of the English of tomorrow. Kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's going to change next?